All right, so I think we have everybody here that's probably coming. I know Lonnie has soccer on Tuesdays a lot of times. Haley's usually here. Hannah's taking her GRE. Janetta would be here if she was coming. I think we about got everybody that's gonna be here. So first off, I was gonna hand back tests today. I'm glad that I'm not, because like I said, of the ones that aren't here, there's kind of no point. And once I found out that a couple were not going to be here for sure, I was like, we'll just wait and talk about those on Thursday. So what we'll do is talk about chapter 9 today. But as far as the tests went, they went about like y'all probably would have expected. If you saw there, you will have a grade posted on, it's already posted on the Grade Center, and how that was formulated, and you can figure out the math on this. You got right off the top, I gave you 10 correct that you missed. So, and then from that point, I just started at 100 and went 2 points per missed question. Since I'd given you 10 freebies, it was just easier to do that for the math. And that wasn't a curve all the way to 100, but it got our highest scores up in the, mid 90 range, and that's good enough. With 51 was the number of questions, but there was actually more than that because some of them had 3 or 4 options on them. Also, I knew the test was hard. I wanted the test to be hard. The next 2 will be very similar, because if we're going to get through these chapters, we're not going to be able to dive that deeply into it in class. We just don't have the class time with the semester cut short, and it makes you guys critically think about the information and become friends with your book. You have to get in the book and look up the information, and when you find it yourself, you're going to remember some of these things. Plus, the way that these tests are put together, they're difficult, and I know that, but they are, they're harder actually than like the CTRS exam to me. It has some hard questions on it, but these are trickier than the ones that you would see on the CTRS exam. There's usually a more clear-cut answer than what you're seeing on some of these questions. Now, some of them were pretty easy. Some of them you could read through and answer without even really looking anything up. But I'm trying to think, we were everywhere from 28 missed on it to about 12, something like that. So big range, very average. The average was probably missing about between 15 and 20 out of the questions. So that gives you just an idea of kind of where you were. And moving forward, you know that the next test is going to be 8 through 14, same type length of test, same sort of test on the same material, and I'll send it home just like I did this last one. And you'll have time, but this time you'll have a little better idea of kind of what's coming, so you can prepare along the way maybe a little more, rather than having to just search for every single thing when the time comes. So we'll talk more about the test on Thursday. There's some of the questions that I would just tell you that we could sit here and debate an entire class on, well, it says in the book this, but it's like one of those things where it's best answer you kind of have to go by, and sometimes that is almost up for discussion too. So we'll go over and try to talk about why the answers are what they are, and I'll get y'all's thoughts about it. And even if it's just thought-provoking, that's a plus too. So we're not gonna I'm not gonna say whether the answers are right. I've got a key that I know what the correct answers are, So we're not going to fight over the things, but if we can discuss why this could be an answer to, that's good talk because we're talking about the material. So now let me get on here and I'm going to pull up. I should have done this while I was sitting around blabbing. Chapter 9. Again, don't forget the submission for this internship site assignment. It's under content, submitted by September 30th at 11:59. And then we'll talk about it on October 1st in class. Y'all will all tell me about the place that does accept interns, where it's at, and all about that kind of stuff. Hopefully we'll get a nice little list together by doing that. All right, I gotta go out of this. That's the other one that I need. All right, screen sharing. So hopefully this is sharing through. If not, you can follow the PowerPoint for chapter 9 for the ones of you that aren't here. This chapter is talking about staffing services, and what that is basically the hiring process. What do you look for when you're going to do working on the hiring process? How do you choose who you're going to hire? What do you do when you need to do discipline for your employees? What's the proper way to do that? We'll talk about a lot of different things in regards to working with staff. Human resources management. It's exactly what it says. That's just managing people in the organization. You are making provisions for the movement of people into, within, and out of the organization. So hiring, transferring from position to position, perhaps, and when people are leaving. That's also part of human resources, whether it is by choice or by being fired or demoted or something along that line. And that's the ugly part of human resources. So when you're planning in human resources, you've got a position that you need to fill. So when the position becomes open, this is the order of events that happen. The position opens. You have a slot. At that point, you've got to look at the budget. So you'll be talking with higher administrators above you to see like what sort of salary you could provide or what sort of payment you will provide for this position. Then you have to come up with a job description review, like what do we need this person to do in this position? And then a job analysis, which is what are the things that, like when you see a job application that says applicant must be able to lift 40 pounds and be on their feet 4+ hours a day, those things that are like that you see on applications, sometimes that's what would be a lot of times in a job analysis. So then you look at candidate selection criteria. How are we going to choose? Where are we trying to get our candidates from? You have to come up with a recruitment plan. Are we going to use LinkedIn? Are we going to, what are some of the other job search sites? Monster. There's another one that I actually was on. Indeed, that was it. Indeed. Are we going to try to go through those routes? Are we going to put something in the paper? Are we going to put out a media post, you know, via Facebook or something like that? Figure out how it's going to be recruited. Then there's a formal job announcement that's usually put out. If you're talking about like a city position, something like that, it really is a formal announcement that's a lot of times made in like a city board meeting, things like that. You know, we've got this position coming open. We wanted to put that out there if you know anyone. Once you do that, you have to go through the whole selection process, which will go more into the steps of the selection process soon. Then, obviously, you have to make a decision and then offer a job. And hopefully the person you offer the job to takes the job, because if they don't, then you kind of have to go back up the list and hit a few of these again. So that's best case scenario. When the job is offered, they'll actually take it. So there's different types of recruitment. And the first is internal recruiting, which if you're already working at a place and looking to move up, this is the kind you want. If you are not working at that place and wanting to get a job there, you don't like internal recruiting, because this is filling job vacancies with people that actually are already working at the facility. Usually moving up, you know, it's your opportunity to move up the chain, or by personal referrals. You're not really putting, you know, your information out just to the general public. You're either moving up people that are already working there, or you're taking, your employees are giving you ideas of people that they think would be good for the job. Then there's external recruiting, where you notify potential applicants that are outside the organization that there's a vacant position and that the agency intends to fill it. That's what external. So internal is basically your opportunity to move up where you're already working. External is opening it up to the public. Obviously, you guys know most of these. The common media forms for distribution of job announcements. You've got your agency website. Like for the state of Mississippi, which is who I've worked for years and years in some form or fashion, there's a Mississippi website that lists all jobs that are available. So every time something comes open, it's there and it's posted. There's internet job listing websites that are there strictly to look for jobs, like we talked about. We're talking about Indeed and Monster and things like that. Glassdoor, isn't that one too? Or am I making that up? I think it is. Professional associations are a good way to get the word of mouth out. You know, if you're looking for a recreation specialist, a good way to get that word out is to get it to the top of, like, say, Mississippi Recreation and Park Association. They can send that information out to all their members. When people in education are looking to hire, as much as our upper management probably doesn't like it, we get informed when Coastal Carolina is looking for an associate professor for this or that. You know, we share openings with each other, and that's just kind of part of how education works. We try to, you know, it's not odd for people to move from location to location. Word of mouth, probably one of the most common ways for the information to get out. University faculty can actually make announcements that these positions are available for you guys. University alumnus, friends and associates of current employees, and then there's actually employment agencies where you can go to look for a job. When you're trying to fill a position, you just give your information to the employment agencies and they put that in front of the people that can use that information. So preparing for the interview, this is a little different than when you first look at this slide, what you might think of. This isn't you taking the interview. You have to prepare as an administrator to give interviews. So you're preparing yourself to give a solid interview where you find out the things that you need to find out to make a good informed decision. That's what you're looking to do. So before you even get into the process, you need to look over the job description, the job specifications, make yourself super familiar with what you've got listed there as being necessary to do the job, and then plan a realistic job preview. You know, this is what you would do on an average day. Just kind of have that down to be able to share. Figure out what type of interview you're going to do. What types of interviews are there when we're saying that? What are some different types of interviews? I'll take anything at this point. Yeah, there you go. Phone. Is it a situation where the person lives in Maine and this job's in Mississippi and it's not feasible for us to fly them in to see us? We probably want to do a phone interview or a Zoom interview or Skype or however you want to say it. Is it going to be a one-on-one interview with just you and them? Is it going to be, say, the director and assistant director and the applicant? Or are you going to maybe have some people from the board there as well, in kind of a roundtable interview? You have to choose what sort of interview you want to do for this position. At that point, you want to develop questions for all the candidates. That is a deal, and what it means here when it says develop questions for all candidates. You want to develop some that are going to be universal for all the candidates, for everybody that you're going to interview. You want to have some of the same questions where you can compare those answers and say, okay, well, I like this answer from this one. I like this answer from this one. So you're looking at the same answers, you know, the different answers to the same question. Now you also, by looking at your applicant's information, you need to develop some questions that are unique for each candidate also, that apply to their specific background, things like that, that they can tell that you are speaking to them individually, not just reading from a script. Because interviews, the thing that's important is interviews need to be formal. You know, let's say, okay, they need to be informal yet professional feel. If you know what I'm saying. Like, you need to bring them in, talk about something a little bit, you know, hey, did you see the game last night? How are you doing? You kind of break the conversation. Don't just jump in and say, hey, why do you want to be here? You know, get them relaxed, because your applicants are going to be tight. They're going to be nervous when they come in. So you want to try to relax them where you can get a true idea of what they're going to be like. So kind of smooth them into it and then jump into the content once you've gotten them relaxed. At the same time, it needs to maintain, you know, that professional, serious feeling enough for them to realize, hey, I'm at an interview. So there's a line there. You can develop an interview guide form where that's for your benefit, where you're keeping up with what you're talking to them about, kind of the order of the interview, how it's going to go. And then again, I don't know why it's repeated at the bottom. Develop questions for each candidate. We already talked about that. Bona fide occupational qualifications. So what this is a specific quality or attribute that employees are allowed to consider when making a hiring decision. This attribute or quality in other situations could be seen as discrimination or in violation of employment law. So there's certain times where in order to qualify for a job, you must have this qualification. Can anybody think of a situation that might fit that? Absolutely. You must have that. That is something you got to have. I'll tell you another good example from somewhere that I worked at the North Mississippi Regional Center. If you are going to work in a female cottage and as a direct care worker, I mean, you're helping with bathing, dressing, things like that. You think that they're going to hire guys into those cottages? A bona fide qualification is that you be a female. Normally, you cannot make hiring decisions based on sex. That situation would be a good example of bona fide occupational qualification. So know what that is. You know, a correctional setting that houses female inmates, they may want a female to work in that ward to work with the females. And normally that wouldn't be the type of hiring that you could do. You know, it would be, like they said, it could be looked as discrimination and grounds for a lawsuit. But if you can justify the fact that you would need a female to be able to relate to these female inmates, then that's another example of this bona fide occupational qualification. Make sense on that? So in choosing, you know, you've gone through the interview process and all this, and there's some common mistakes that are made as far as selection of who you're going to hire, hiring mistakes, and some things that happen during the process that are mistakes as well. You can miss out on important information. You can ask illegal questions. Let's see. 9.2. I made a note of this to look at. Maybe I should have put a bookmark too. I'm looking at the wrong one. Okay, so some ideas of things we're talking about here, like asking illegal questions. When you're asking questions, you can ask the candidate's current name and whether they've ever worked under a different name, but you can't ask their maiden name. Don't really understand that one. Let's see. You cannot ask a candidate's age. You can't ask how much longer he or she plans to work before retiring. Man, that's some information that you'd want to know as an employer. You know, is this person coming in here trying to get this job, get their base salary up just a little bit right before they retire? Are they, and then I'm going to have to go right through this again in 2 years? Or are they here to work for a while? You can't ask them that. Cannot ask a candidate's sex. You cannot ask their sex. So if you can't tell, just make your best judgment. You can't ask questions or make comments remotely considered to be flirtatious or ask about sexual preference. Of course, that makes sense. Can't ask marital status or questions regarding children or family information. Some of these are, that's the kind of thing that you would think, marital status could come up in just your kind of relaxed conversation. These are things that can't be used in the interview process and have anything to do with your decision. I'll put it that way. And you shouldn't ask the questions. Let's see, what else? You can't ask the candidate to identify their national origin, citizenship, race, or color. Can't ask what language they speak when they're off the job. You can't ask whether they've ever been arrested or for information regarding a conviction that's not job related. This is table 9.3 in the book. It's actually very interesting. I'm not going to go through any more of it because it's going to take the whole class to do it. 9.2 is actually really good too, if you want to make a note. It's a good rundown about preparing for the interview and actually conducting the interview. And it gives you a lot of tips. Like on conducting the interview, I talked about how during the first few minutes of the interview, the first line manager's goal is to establish rapport with the candidate and to put the applicant at ease by talking about some topic not related to the job. So putting them at ease is going to put them in a better place to relax and actually answer your questions that you're wanting to find out. Hopefully you will put them more. Did anybody see Matt Corral's press conference after the game the other night? He was not comfortable in front of the camera. They should have asked him a few questions prior to that or talked about food or something first. Anyway, that's off topic, but still. How'd y'all like his hair? I had so many funny things on my like Facebook page and stuff, like picture of him and Chris Cross and Coolio. Hey, whatever keeps it out of your eyes, and if he keeps playing like he did, because he actually played pretty well in the game, he can wear pigtails. I don't care. All right, let's go on. So we talked about illegal questions. You need to be very clear about how you're going to make your selection. What are the most important parts that we're going to find out through this process to help us choose our candidate. Sometimes candidates are put off by the selection process. This is a situation where the candidate that you choose that you really want may not even accept the job because they don't like the way that the interview went down, the way or the questions they were asked. Biases and stereotypes affect judgment, and that's true. So that's something to try to stay away from when doing interviews and making selection processes. Another problem is if you don't take enough notes, you'll be like, well, I can remember what they're saying. And then you interview 5, 6 people and you're going back thinking about what's going on and you don't have sufficient notes and you start jumbling up who said what to which question. You need to take plenty of notes. Sometimes mistakes are made due to misinterpretation of things that you see as far as applicant information. Again, here's another big one, allowing one characteristic to influence judgment. You might not like the look of somebody when they come in the room, and that's just like they might not be dressed exactly how you thought they would be for an interview. Maybe that's the best they could do. Maybe that's all they had. Maybe they're trying to better themselves. So you can't let that totally be a break all right off the bat. Whatever this one thing may be, don't let that totally influence the judgment process. And then sometimes you have an urgency to fill a position, and you almost would just take anybody just to get the position filled because you need a warm body that's going to be there doing the job. So rushing through the process is another issue. So once someone's hired, you've got some different things that you have to do with them. Training and development are on this slide. Training is basically where you're giving them information, skills, specific knowledge and skills to aid in their current job performance for what you're bringing them in to do. That's one thing that you're going to do. It needs to be ongoing or on a kind of a set schedule. And a lot of it up front, because, you know, maybe in some cases, the best way to learn is just to get thrown in there and do it. That's not how you want to feel when you're starting a job. You need to have information up front and feel as though you have been trained. Otherwise, that's a good excuse for them to use when things don't go as well as they should. So you need to give enough training to where they're going to know what they're doing when they come in to start a job. Development is more lifelong learning and career development, where you send them for CEUs, you send them to conferences, you give them learning opportunities. Development is something that a lot of times people do on their own, you know, reading about current trends. If you're a recreation therapist, looking for ideas to do with your clientele, new things to stir that up. And that's something that you can do on your own. And this is lifelong learning that needs to be long-term, ongoing, all the time, as far as development. Something else that has to do with this whole process, once you have someone added to your staff, performance appraisals are important. And something that you need to do up front is communicate the performance expectations to your staff. That needs to be clearly done, and it needs to be done up front where they know what is expected. If you don't clearly define these things, then it's hard for you to follow up and actually appraise what they've done if you didn't give them clear indication. After a predetermined time period, then you need to provide feedback on how well they're meeting the expectations that you laid out up front. And there's different types of performance appraisals, different ways that they're done. We'll talk about some of those. There's evaluative performance appraisals. These situations, this is much like an interview. Performance appraisals need to be treated the same way, in that they need to be relaxed yet professional in the way that you handle them. You don't want it to be something that your employees are just dread, because they're, oh man, he's going to call me in, he's going to chew me up for everything that I didn't do. You know, hopefully you did everything and you're going to get a great appraisal and all that stuff. But by keeping it relaxed, your employees won't dread this situation so much. And what these evaluative performance appraisals are for are to determine things like pay raises, whether someone is ready to transfer or be promoted up the ladder. Sometimes it could be whether they need to move down the ladder because they're not meeting this, and this that were named as things that they must do in the position. That's grounds for demotion. And as long as it's documented, then they really have no leg to stand on as far as being, they can be mad. But if you gave them clear instructions up front and they did not meet criteria, then they can be demoted. even all the way to termination if they're not doing some very important things that they need to be doing. Evaluative performance appraisals focus on past performance. Then we'll talk about developmental performance appraisals, which the purpose is to improve performance, and it's focused on the future. So know the difference on this slide, that evaluative focuses on past performance, where developmental performance appraisal is focused on the future. You know, this is what we're doing right now. This is what I've seen you do. This is what we want to do moving forward. This is some changes we're going to do that can improve what we're offering. So some different appraisal methods: results-oriented evaluations. You set objectives for specific outcomes, and it's easy to see whether or not these happen or not. Critical incident reports. What happens here, these occur when an employee's performance results in noteworthy success or failure, one or the other. Can anybody think of a situation that might be the case, where an employee, whether they succeeded or failed on something specific, was a critical incident? You know, it really made or break the situation. Anything come to mind? I have one that jumped straight in my head, and it's due to what I've done in the past, but okay, the one that came to my mind, I'll make this easy on y'all. When I was working for the Park Commission and I was over the City Aquatics Department, I had a whole lot of lifeguards that worked for me. So we had some situations where there had to be saves. We had some people jump on each other's heads. I mean, we never, thank God, we didn't have to do the whole neck spine board situation ever while I was there. But we had a lot of different saves, and what I had to do was go back and look at how each save was handled. And by definition, those were all very critical incidents. So you look at your employees in those critical situations. What are the two outcomes? Number one, it was very effective. They did a great job. They handled this properly. Number two, 911 wasn't called. They didn't, they took longer than they should have to get them out. They died. They didn't die, but I'm just saying that would be a situation where the critical incident report would be on the negative side. You know, that's a big deal situation where you're judging on that. Rubrics. These are behaviorally anchored rating scales. BARS is how they, in the text, they shorten it to that a lot. You list job behaviors, and they're labeled as being like good, moderate, or poor choices. That's what's going on there. Ranking performance appraisal method is one that I'll get y'all's opinion on this in a second. You compare and rank your employees. What do y'all think about that? Is that a good thing? What's it used for? If you're going to rank your employees, why would you do that? Perhaps for raises, or what else? Promotions. Yep. That is very motivating for some, and especially the ones who would get raises and promotions. What would it do for the ones who didn't? They're not going to like it. So you'll have a few that really like that sort of appraisal, and a lot that would not, obviously. I think it would be worse overall for the morale, although all in all, it may be a good way to judge who would get promoted or raises. Narrative type appraisal methods there's a lot of freedom in this process. It's, as it says, it's narrative, it's written out, it's long, written or typed out, and the administrator, leader, manager is going to document things like each employee's strengths and weaknesses, their characteristic job performance that they're doing. It's long in nature, takes a while to do it. That's probably the drawback on that. It's a lot of work for the manager to do this type of appraisal method. And there's some rating errors that happen when performance appraisals are being done. Let me throw a little personal thought on performance appraisals. I've worked at places that they were supposed to do performance appraisals every year. They didn't do them. They just didn't do it. My bosses never did the performance appraisals. So that's not very motivating for me to do a good job. And then I've worked, then they started doing them, but they had no meaning whatsoever. What's the purpose of doing performance appraisal if it has no bearing on your job? If it has no bearing on your opportunities to move up or your pay, things like that. If that's the case, it's really a worthless thing that doesn't benefit anybody. It just takes time away. Best case scenario is when you perform performance appraisals and they actually mean something. You know, if you know that the better job you do, the more benefit that you're going to get from that, then that's obvious that that's the way that you want to go. So here's some different ways of that people have been shown to make errors when they're rating people as far as their appraisals. Leniency error, you're talking about you're too nice. You're giving everybody the benefit of the doubt. You're giving them a little higher score than they probably should be getting because you're being lenient on everything. Oh, well, you know, they got a young child at home. I'm sure he was trying. I'll give him excellent on this one. You know, you're just being a little too lenient. That's actually an error that can be made. Halo effect, what that is, that's evaluating based on a single characteristic, either positively or negatively. You know, that's letting one thing affect your entire appraisal, basically. Not the way to do it. Ambiguous evaluation standards. What happened here is supervisors give different meanings to ratings. It's saying that different supervisors look at things like outstanding, above average, and satisfactory in different ways. So if your appraisal scales are written in that way, just know that different supervisors would be ranking people differently based on how they view outstanding and how they view satisfactory. It's not going to be the same for everybody who's in a managerial position unless it's written out exactly what each one of those entails. You know, satisfactory is gets to work on time. You know, you have a list of what that would be, then it would become more standardized and you should get the same responses. But without a key to go by, it wouldn't really work. Recency error is one where instead of looking at the full picture, you know, if it's a 1-year performance appraisal, you're swayed as a manager, as an appraiser, by the most recent events. You know, they really didn't do a good job for the first 8 months of the year, but man, they put on a good fall festival last week and they have really stepped it up. And you let that recent event affect their entire appraisal. It makes up for the 8 months that they didn't do anything and that they were late for work all the time. So recency error, that's what that one is about. This is misplaced in the slideshow, but there's different types of interviews. Back when we were talking about the interview process, screening interviews to me would be a situation where you're finding out some specific information to see whether somebody is worthy of moving further in the interview process. You know, if you need somebody who has a Class C driver's license because they're going to be driving a certain van that you have to have that license. And they claim on their application that they do, you may do a screening call to say, hey, I just wanted to double check before we get farther into this process to make sure that you do have the C driver's license and that you don't have any, and that you don't have more than one moving violation in the past year, because those are things that we have to have as part of this process. That's finding out whether they can move on to the next step. That's basically what a screening interview would be. Obviously, we all know what a phone interview would be. We know why that may have to happen. You know, they may not have internet connectivity. They may be far away. Then you've got, I would throw in with the phone interview, you know, online Zoom interviews, Skype interviews, things like that. They're similar. What do you think about phone interviews? Do you think someone who gets a phone interview gets a fair shake compared to someone who is there in person?
No, you don't need to see the volume.
I think it would be hard. I think you would have to do a very thorough vetting process on a phone interview. And you would have to really, really try to not make assumptions, you know, and just go by the facts of what you are given. I think it would be totally unfair to have a lot of candidates in person and then have a phone interview to go along. Now, Skype or something like that, it's better. You can see the person. It's still not as good, but it's better. You can see their face, you can see reactions, things like that. As far as face-to-face interviews, you've got individual interviews, group interviews, and then assessment centers is another thing that's listed here as a type of interview. And that's where they're actually looking for specific information in regards to moving forward in the process. Sorry, that was out of place and I need to fix that for next time. Another not fun thing that we have to deal with and in this whole human resources staffing situation, a lot of times people that work for you are going to have to receive discipline. And most places have what they call a P&P manual, policies and procedures. And in that P&P manual, you're going to have information telling how each one of these is going to work. It has to be there. You have to have the discipline steps, the discipline reasons, how it's going to go down, because if you don't, what's going to happen? You're going to get sued because somebody's going to say you didn't treat me fairly, because people like to sue people these days over a little bit of anything, okay? That's why it's in writing, and you must follow the guidelines for this. This is generally the route that discipline will go when someone's not doing their job or doing something specifically. Just say, when my mom worked at the bank, they had very strict rules for employees regarding attendance. And that was, one of the main things is they had to be there. You couldn't just call in sick all the time and keep a job there. And some people got fired that were trying to do a good job, but just miss too many days. But that's part of their stuff, and they had it written out very straightforward way. The first thing that happens as far as discipline when you're having trouble with an employee, basically you're just going to give them a verbal reprimand, where you call them to an office or a space that's secluded and talk to them, not in front of everybody else, about what's going on, find out maybe why this has been happening and what can we do to improve this in the future. Those are the type things that you would do when you're in the state of an oral or verbal reprimand. The next step, you've already given a verbal reprimand. You've had a talk about, we need to fix this. This is what's going on. You move to a written reprimand. It's going to go in their file, where you explain, we spoke on such and such a day. The behavior continued to, or, she has been late 2 more times since then. It's going to be signed by yourself and signed by the person. It goes in their personnel file. So now they've gotten an oral reprimand, which you probably wouldn't make any note of. You don't want it to count against them and be in their file. The written reprimand is the first step of creating a paper trail of, hey, if this keeps happening, I'll have documentation where I can get rid of them. That's kind of a bad way to, mean way to put it, but it's true. You have to have, if you don't have documentation of where someone isn't doing their job, you can't just walk in and say, okay, we got to get somebody else. See ya. Because they're going to turn around and say, you never had a conference with me. You never did. Even if you had talked to them, if you don't have documentation, you can't just cut somebody. After you've gone the stage of a written reprimand, if things continue to go on, now this doesn't have to be, there's also cases where there's different levels of transgression, let's say. At the NMRC, if someone is accused, let's just say sleeping while they're on the clock, they're working in a cottage and they get caught sleeping on the couch, you jump straight to 3. They call it like a group 1, group 2, group 3 offenses. Different places have different ways of discipline. You jump straight to like a group 3, where you're going to get a strong written reprimand spoken to by several people on staff, be suspended for some days, and possibly even terminated, depending on if something happened while you were sleeping that was worthy of that happening. But that's the next step. You're hanging on the edge once you get to this suspension reprimand. And then from there, it would move to termination. If you've gone through all these steps, you've got what you need as a manager to, engage in the firing or termination process. And then the last part of the chapter talks a whole lot about employment laws. And I'm not going to, there will be some questions that you'll have to look up the stuff in the book, but for time's sake, I'm not going to just pour through all that here today. All it's written right here. The goal is to achieve equal employment opportunity, period. Where all people are treated fairly and equally in employment decisions, and you're protecting against discrimination based on sexual orientation, age, disabilities, marital status, parental or pregnancy status, military veteran status also. What do you think about pregnancy? If you are hiring a job and Cheyenne comes in and John comes in for the interview and you're short and you need somebody to come in and fill this position as a rec therapist, Cheyenne is 7 months pregnant, but she's very qualified for this job. Probably more qualified than John. Just no harm meant there. What do you think as a hiring person? Okay, what do you think and what should you do?
Well, I'm probably thinking, hey, in 2 months, she's got to go on maternity leave. So that's gonna leave her short-handed again.
Yeah, in a couple months, she's going to be gone for 3 months. That sucks. Why would we hire her? We could get him in. I don't think he can get pregnant. He's not going to leave for 3 months. I mean, he's not nearly as good as she is, but he'll do. That's the kind of thought process. But in a hiring situation, you probably, if you go through the whole deal and Cheyenne is the better choice, regardless of whether she's pregnant or not, that's who you need to hire. That's basically what it's coming down to, as far as you can't hold that pregnancy against her as far as your hiring process. Make sense? I mean, it's, even though from self-serving, as a manager, as a hiring personnel, that thought is going to come through your mind. There's no way that it couldn't, but if you can't justify for other reasons other than pregnancy, you better hire her, or she's going to own that place where you're working. Just saying. All right. That was a little better chapter than some of them. Those are real life situations that you will see in administrative roles. Discipline is a real thing. Doing interviews is something that you really need to work at and practice at if you're going to be doing. You don't want to just come in to do an interview just blind and say, I'm just going to wing it. You need to have a plan. You need to have a strategy. So the stuff that we went over today is pretty useful, especially once you come to a position of where you do help with the hiring and discipline processes, things like that. And that may be once you get a chance to move up a ladder a little bit. But good information to use. On Thursday, we will talk about your assignment to turn in tomorrow night by midnight. Turn that into Blackboard. Be prepared to talk on it on Thursday. And then we'll talk about the tests. That's what we'll cover that day. And then for a little while after that, we're just going to shoot through these chapters until we can get the next fun test in. But don't worry about, I don't think many of you got test scores that they should have been better than you expected, honestly, for not seeing the test, because I knew it was hard and you knew it was hard. And I was actually proud of most everyone in the class for how you did, because I knew it was hard. And that's how I wanted it to be. But that will good enough for today. I kept you almost the whole time. So y'all have a good one, and I will see you guys next time. See you on Thursday to cover that stuff.